Hi, my name is Dr. Alan Heide, and I am a licensed therapist with over 15 years of experience working with complex cases in the realm of mental health. I am tired of the videos that exist on the internet that break down tips and tricks of what you should do to live your life. I'm a firm believer that everybody should be autonomous and living their life to the best of their ability, and I sit with people day in and day out to help them do that. We're going to look at some videos, we're going to get into some information. By no means are we here to tear anybody down, but we are here to share truth. We'll see you in some of the videos.
I got 5 super spicy truths that'll hit you right between eyebrows if you're ready. It'll also expedite your healing like chef's kiss. They're not easy to hear, but they'll help if you're ready. My name is Trish Lam, a trauma-informed life coach, and I help people heal through inconvenient truths. You ready?
Inconvenient truths that'll hit you right between the eyes, a trauma-informed life coach. First of all, this is a craze. This is something that is cropped up in society these days of trauma-informed life coaches. If you're going to be a trauma-informed life coach, you might as well just go and get the education to become a therapist, to become a psychologist, to become a social worker. And look, I understand not everybody has that kind of stuff, that kind of time to do those things. But if you're going to come on the internet and position yourself as a trauma-informed life coach with hard-hitting facts that hit you right between the eyes, then you should have time to go and get the proper education around these things. We'll see what she has to say, but right off the bat with life coaches, I'm always in a kind of skeptical place of like, why not just go get the proper education, which then tells us to not, right? In the very beginning, it tells us to not give advice. And here's why this is so important. And then I'll shut up and we'll get back into the video here. But to give somebody hard-hitting truths that hit right between the eyes, what if that person isn't ready for that information? You know, I think the internet is maybe the wrong place to go about those things. But I think also a lot of times life coaching is the wrong way to go about those things, because as a therapist, what I'll share with you is you don't need anybody to come in and coach you and tell you how to live your life. What you need to do is get into a position where you're processing through things in a way that fits and feels right to you so that you can make proper decisions in your life. That's where lasting change comes from. And I'm sure she's going to position some of the information that way, that this is how you get into a position to make some changes for yourself. But she's going to be the one who is the expert to give you that information. And I would just share from the clinical perspective, she's not an expert. And I've looked into the background for her. There is no credentials to state that she is. But let's see what her hard-hitting truths are.
Number 1, it's nobody's job to understand you, but yours. Do not make other people responsible for understanding you better than you know yourself or understand yourself. You want to know red flag energy? Somebody who takes pleasure in the statement, I know you better than you know yourself. That is toxic shit. Nobody should know you better than know yourself. Nobody. Not your mother, not your father, not your partner, not your best friend, not your kids, not your auntie. When you put your authenticity or who you are in the hands of somebody else, it's like putting your finances in the hands of somebody else. They don't have as much of a vested interest. Not a smart move. It's a recipe for resentment. Stop making other people
So much like life coaching, it's the word salad, right? And I love that term around here, word salad, that these things that she's sharing, they sound true. And there is an aspect of it that is truth, which is you should know yourself, and you should be working to know yourself and to take care of yourself in a deep understanding of patterns of behaviors, why you're choosing to behave in certain ways, where you're distracting yourself from your emotions. But instead of breaking down every little thing that she said to highlight as wrong, what I would say is that, well, sure, she's got some truths there, but I'm not hearing any hard-hitting fact of like, well, how do you work through that? How do you get there, right? The answer from a clinical perspective is that those things take time, especially if you have these deep-rooted patterns of enabling others and people-pleasing and putting your well-being in the hands of other people. These are very complex patterns rooted in trauma, rooted in abandonment, rooted in neglect that take time to unpack. And it takes a dedicated series of not just implementation of skills, but support and community and work with trained professionals to get to the bottom of these things. And it's not just going to happen overnight. A caveat I would give on this one too is she did mention partnerships, and it really is important. It's very important that in the communication in your intimate relationships with your partner, that they do know you like the back of their hand. And we do that through the process of vulnerability. Now, we would want to make sure that we hear what she's saying, which is no one should know you better than you, but your partner should know you pretty darn well. They should be able to know you like the back of their hand if you're being vulnerable in a relationship and there's a deep foundation of trust and honesty so that you guys can stay out of conflict and communicate better. So there's a lot of nuanced, intertangled webs in this one, where to call it a hard-hitting fact, that's life coaching 101. It's like, here's the hard hitting fact. But the reality is there's a lot of pieces that go into this, and no piece of information on the internet is going to give you the one fact that you need to make a change right now, today, and live a better life. These things take time.
Responsible for understanding you. That's your job. Number 2, the people that hurt you are not responsible for helping you heal. Their job is done. They played the role of the villain or the abuser or whatever they did. End scene. Do not put that person in the driver's seat of your healing. They are not capable of helping you with it. You are responsible for your own healing. Not only is it not the person that hurt you, their responsibility to help you heal. It's not your partner's, not your mama's, not your best friend either. You're responsible for your healing, and that's it. Making anybody else responsible.
So again, we've got some truth here in what she's sharing on the surface, right? It is your responsibility to heal. But this is that common narrative, right, of that there are villains in the world, right? It's like when I was young, I used to have to tell people in my life, namely my brother, who would make everybody out to be a villain, you don't live in a superhero movie. Right? There are no villains, and you're not the superhero. You're not the hero of the story. We are all just living our lives, and some people have destructive patterns of behaviors, right? It's our responsibility, like she was sharing, to take care of ourselves, to be the ones who are choosing positive, healthy actions. But as we do that, just because other people have engaged and chosen to engage in behaviors that have either harmed you or impacted you in a negative way does not make them a villain. See, she talked about that kind of victim mentality, but notice the dynamic of the interconnected web of like, you can't hold a perspective that somebody else is a villain and move away from a victim mentality. These two things do not work well together in our psychology and the way that we process the world. If you really do want to detach from these things and get away from people's harmful behaviors, you can't view them as a villain. You have to view them in their humanity as we take responsibility for our own humanity. And again, I would just point out, right, that these things sound true in word salad on TikTok and the internet. But when you get into the dynamics, it takes time to unfold these dynamics. And that's what I'm really trying to maybe impart in these videos is like, don't even take my word for it. I am a doctor of psychology and I've worked in the field for 15 years, but don't just take my word on the internet for it. Take the resources, go sit down with a therapist and break down these dynamics if you're having a hard time.
Responsible for that is a zero-sum game. Number 3. If you've got a problem that you've repeated in your life a few times, you can't solve that problem at the same level of consciousness that got you into the problem in the first place. In other words, if you got into that problem because you had copious amounts of shame and now you've accrued a ton of debt, shame and that consciousness is not going to get you out of debt. You've got to think above the problem. You've got to have a different perspective on the problem because that's the only way to grow. Problems are opportunities if you look at them the right way. If you keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result,
that's the definition of insanity.
You cannot solve the same problem at the consciousness that created it. You can't solve a survival mode problem with more survival mode. Make sense?
Ooh, the level of consciousness, right? These are the terms that get thrown around with life coaching on the internet. It's like they use the terms from the field of psychology, don't understand them, but then throw it into a nice little packaged, like really pretty as they sit seductively and share information with you that sounds correct. It's like, of course, you can't solve a problem by engaging in the problem still. It's like, how is that a hard hitting fact? Everybody should know that, right? And I imagine that you don't want your intelligence insulted by a trauma informed life coach telling you to raise your level of consciousness and think above the problem. It's like, let me get down to a brass tacks with you. You need to get into an understanding of the problem and address the hard hitting truth that you have done this to yourself, which relates to things she was just talking about of taking responsibility for yourself. It's like you got to get in and sit with that and then make a choice to turn that over, and a conscious choice to the ways that we talk about ourselves, the ways that we choose certain behaviors, and the ways that we interact with people. We've got to look and assess, take inventory, turn certain things over and say, hey, I give this one up. I can't engage with this one anymore. I need to choose something differently, and I need support to do that. And the biggest way we do that is by observing other people who've done it, not by being told by a trauma-informed life coach that we need to just raise our consciousness and think above the problem. No, we need some practical observations. We need to see people who are making better decisions. We need to talk to ourselves a little bit differently than the way we were talking to ourselves before. So going on the internet and hearing like, ooh, your consciousness level is out of whack and you need to think above the problem is not going to solve anything. It's not a hard-hitting fact. And if it was, I don't think it would lead to very much change anyway. People typically need community support, and they need to observe people making better decisions if things are actually going to change.
This is why healing is really important. Number 4, victims don't heal. And neither do liars. Victims can't heal because they're disempowered. A disempowered person can't heal because if we're a victim, we make other people responsible for either villainizing us so we can perpetuate that consciousness, or we need to be rescued by somebody else. Either way, the power is never within us. So unless you're ready to let go of that identity, you ain't gonna heal. Same thing with liars, which really means if you're not ready to tell the inconvenient truths about your life, you're not gonna heal. The only thing that can help you heal is the truth. And sometimes the only truth that's going to help you heal are inconvenient truths like this. And you're going to have to be brave enough to hold them and live your life by them. Number 5, shitty parenting to help you heal is the truth. And sometimes the only truth that's going to help you heal are inconvenient truths like this.
So again, we've got what sounds like truth, right? And again, this lady's not a liar. She has read maybe books and is using a false credential to impart information on a surface level to you that sounds like truth and maybe gets a lot of clicks on TikTok. Victims don't heal and liars don't heal. That is a very reductionistic way to look at the healing process. It also, I think, kind of invalidates people who have been victimized by people who have harmed them, right? Which would go against some of the points that she was talking about earlier. Again, remember, there are no villains in life, but there are people who've done shitty things and people who've been victimized by those shitty things. And the people victimized by those shitty things can and do heal. Now, what we also know in an interconnected, really complicated web is that people who've been victimized by very hurtful things tend to be out of touch at times with their reality, which causes other people in their life to feel like they're lying, right? So what do we do about those people that maybe don't know that they're lying or don't know that they're engaged in reputation management, don't know that they're manipulating the truth because these are protective behaviors? Do we just say, on the surface level? No, they don't heal because they're liars, right? No, what we do is we invite them into a process that holds up the reality of truth. And it's really important to have a relationship with truth. And here's a truth I'll share is that trauma-informed life coaches don't exist. It's not a real thing. Sorry, sweetheart. You are telling what sounds like truths, but to the ears of a clinician, it all just kind of sounds like muffled bullshit.
And you're going to have to be brave enough to hold them and live your life by them. Number 5, shitty parenting is no longer an excuse for you. It's tired. It's old. You need a new story. If you keep blaming the fact that you're not living the life you're supposed to be living on shitty parenting and you are over the age of 35 years old, it's like using a dial-up phone instead of a cell phone. It's just not relevant anymore. Stop bitching about your mom. Stop venting about it so that you can heal and level up. Sound good?
Sound good? No, it doesn't sound good. You know, people move through things when they're ready to move through things. Now, I'm a pretty hard-nosed therapist when it comes to boundaries and parenting yourself and stepping into your mature reality as an adult. So there's the part of what she's sharing where I would say like, yeah, you know, we need to step into our adulthood and learn how to take care of the inner child inside of ourselves and really truly be a mature adult. But what doesn't sound good to me is invalidating somebody's experiencing what they've experienced in their life and tell them that you need to let that go, that you can no longer have that excuse. Number one, and this is the biggest issue with life coaches, is who are you to tell anybody that they should just move past something because, well, that's just invalid and it's out of date and it's like you're using a wall phone as opposed to your cell phone. It's like, I mean, it sounds like a funny analogy, but I'm not laughing because the reality is people are ready to move on in their own time. And if you tell them that it's invalid, they're just going to dig their heels in even deeper and they're not going to feel heard and understood by you, which is, again, why I would say you don't need a life coach, right? They're only going to come in and tell you what you have to do. They're not going to hear where you're at and help you move through to where you need to go. Mostly, and here's the kicker, mostly because they do not know how. They didn't get the education. They didn't put the time into getting the education. And if they did, they decided to walk away from the actual work of sitting in a therapeutic setting with somebody to walk them through that because they felt that there was a quicker way to do it. They thought there was a quicker way to do it. What I'm here to share with you as a clinician is that the only true efficacy in the work that we do to grow is when you feel you're ready to move through certain things and step into your mature adult life and into your realities and sit with truth. That's your job. I'm here to help you uncover it. Therapists are here to help you uncover it. Life coaches are here to tell you what you should and shouldn't do and that the things that you're doing are outdated. And if I'm wrong on any of that, I would just challenge you to go to TikTok, type in life coach and watch what pops up. It's a bunch of people telling you how to live your life. And as a clinician, I listen to it and I would not take their advice if they paid me to take it. And I think that's where the proof is in the pudding.
I've never told anybody this before, like anybody. In 2014, during a depressive episode, I spent $87 on Candy Crush.
You know, it's like, it reminds, you know what it reminds me of is like the hairdresser that tells you that they're basically a therapist too. People, when they find out that you work with human beings, are going to open up. They're going to share things, but they're not going to share the deep, vulnerable truths. And anybody knows that. Anybody who's ever worked with a person knows that that's the truth. And most people just understand that anyway, that people aren't just walking around sharing deep, dark truths. What's also true about this kind of life coaching dichotomy that's grown with like rapid fire in our society is that what do you do then with that information? Someone shares with you that they've made a debilitating decision to spend a bunch of money on an online video game during a depressive episode. Okay, well, what do you do about that then? right? Apparently, as a life coach, what you do is you go and you make a funny little TikTok that goes viral. But the reality is that that's a destructive behavior. No wonder they're feeling depressed. It sounds a lot like self-sabotage in the way of a perceived payout that they're going to receive, some kind of dopamine from playing this game that actually just perpetuates a pattern of self-sabotage and a depressed mood, right? So what do we do with that? Is the question. The life coaches, they don't seem to answer. They like the optics. And this is one of the biggest pet peeves for me, just in life, but as a therapist, is people who like the optics of working with people who struggle, as opposed to actually helping people understand deeper dynamics and make changes in their life. It's like, it's a funny TikTok, and everybody's had that experience where they're kind of sitting there trapped with somebody, and they open up about a piece of information that you would think is vulnerable, but it's not vulnerable because the person isn't going to make any changes around it, and they're not actually looking for any type of feedback. They're just telling you things, right? That is what life coaches experience. People just tell them things, and then they tell other people things of what to do. It's like it's a never-ending cycle of a lack of vulnerability and advice. And I've treated more people than I can imagine over a 15-year career who come to me after seeing life coaches, and they're in the same place that they were when they first started, which is no understanding of the dynamics underneath their struggles and no actions in place to actually help them make lasting change, because that person themselves hadn't found it and hadn't sat with the feelings long enough. They were just told, go do this, go do that, do this, and do that. It's like, okay, then what? Right? Where's the awareness? Where is the deep insight that isn't cheap? Right? That you can make a bet will lead to change. Where are those things being explored? I'm not going to sit here and say every life coach on the face of the earth doesn't do deep work, but when you go on the internet, you're not finding a lot of it. What you actually find most times is social media influencer life coaches, where the deepest part of the work they do is that they're famous and well known. So people listen to them. That doesn't do anything for the practicality of people's day-to-day lives. So when I see a funny TikTok like the one that you guys just saw, it's like, yeah, when you say you work with people, people tell you the darndest things. It happens to me as a therapist, but when I'm off the clock and out in the world and people tell me those weird things that they do that are self-sabotage behaviors or otherwise, I don't then get into a therapy session with them, because I know it's not going to accomplish anything. They're not going to change. They weren't telling me that because they're ready for change.
When people say they're life coaches, and I know for a fact that their life is a huge shit show.
It's life coach fraud.
Oh my, it should be, don't do what I do, coach.
I have met probably 3 to 4 people in my life that I knew as something other than being a life coach. And I'm like, well, what have you been up to? And this one woman that I know, she looked me straight in the eye. She was like, well, I'm a life coach. And I remember thinking, what the fuck? You are a stage 5 eye of the hurricane meets landfall, no insurance policy. There is no goddamn way I'm hiring you to coach a t-ball team, much less my life.
And there it is. I mean, that's really it. I mean, it's funny. I was cracking up when I first saw this video, but it's like there was a little subtle point in there. It's like a coach coaches sports, they coach musicians, they coach an action, right? They don't coach your life. And one of the phenomenons you see a lot of times is that these life coaches are in a very unstable spot, and there's a lot of work to be done. When I became a therapist, there was a lot of work for me to do in my individual life, and a lot of really painful places of awareness to come to if I was going to sit in the room and work with people and help them navigate how to sit with those feelings. Even if my life had been peaches and cream and I didn't have difficult things in my own behaviors that I had to work through and acknowledge, I still would have had to learn how to sit with myself in order to make space for someone to sit with themselves. And life coaches, it's no knock on them as human beings, but they don't do that. They don't make the space for people to sit and to deeply process. And most of it is because they're not looking at themselves. They're looking outwardly. How do we need to engage in the world, and what are these success tips? And most life coaches eventually are going to get into some kind of financial guru type of position. That's the phenomenon these days, is it's never actually life coaching to help you understand deep ways to process your generational experiences in your family, or what your emotional experiences are. If you watch the progression, it's always into some kind of progression of your finances, right? Because if your finances aren't in order, you can't pay them their high premium for them to be a rich life coach, right? And the cycle goes round and round. And I want to be clear that I'm not saying that that's every single life coach, but I tend to agree with what these ladies were saying here and joking around about is, I'm not, even if you're a stable life coach, I'm not going to come in and pay you to coach my life. I'm sorry. I have a therapist who allows the space for me to sit with my feelings and to learn myself so that I can make the best decisions for my own individual experience. I played sports and baseball for 19 years. If I need a coach, I'll call the coaches who coached me in the sport. But if I need to figure out what I'm feeling and the ways in which I'm interacting in interpersonal relationships, I'm going to go sit in a dedicated space where I can process those things with a professional who actually knows what to do with those emotions, with those dynamics, and to help me see things that I can't see. Not who's going to sit there and tell me that I need to do things, sit with me for 15 or 30 minutes, and then send me on my merry way. That's not going to work. It doesn't work for anybody. And this is why we have a perpetuated cycle of sickness in our society. It's not just life coaches, but it's this concept that, like, just pull yourself up from your bootstraps and build your finances and, go and generally be honest. It's like, well, yeah, you should be honest, and you should be taking care of your finances, and you should be taking care of your own responsibilities. But what if you can't? Right? What if you've been stuck in cycles of dynamics that are really harmful? We as therapists want to help you unpack those things and move you away from the life coaches. Let them go life coach each other. Why don't we come into a space where we take some recommendations, sit with trained professionals, and make some real change that is lasting in our lives? If you like this content, if you related to any of it, found it funny, found it informative, we react to content like this week in and week out. We break the cycle here every week. You can tune into our live podcast. It's Thursdays at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time every week with another therapist who talks about in-depth topics, how to sit with your feelings, how to grow, how to change. We love you guys. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.